welcome to Athens City Council. It is Monday, August 12th, 2024 at 7 p.m. and tonight we have a series of committee meetings. The first of which is Planning and Development Committee, chaired by Councilmember Swank and joined by Member Thomas, Spielness, and Wood.
For our visitors this evening, those three people that just got up did not forget to turn in their homework or anything. When we have committee meetings, we limit the folks on the dais to the members of that committee, except when we do committee of the whole. If you're wondering what I'm talking about, Jeff, the two gentlemen from Columbus, I wonder what they did to get the boot. Planning and development tonight. For those of you who have looked at the agenda packet are probably thinking we are going to be here as long as it takes to watch Gone with the Wind. Planning and development agenda has 240 pages of documentation. For those of you my age, we'll give you the Cliff Notes version. First thing we're going to talk about this evening is a rather unique opportunity for the city of Athens and the citizens of Athens. And that is the fate of what many of you will refer to as the old Follett's building at the corner of Court Street and Union, which has sat empty now for more years than we wish it had. What's going to happen to it? How's it going to happen? And how will the city benefit from it? We're actually going to start probably from the top down because we're talking about energy. And hopefully, as part of this plan we're going to discuss this evening, we're going to hear about how that building can be retrofitted, made much more energy efficient, and hopefully move in a direction of not being net zero, but certainly not consuming as much electricity and gas and things as we currently are using. We have a couple of representatives from Columbus this evening from the law firm of Bricker and Graydon, and they are going to share with us in detail what the plan is, how it works, and what we as a city council needs to do to help take the next step in getting that building open, occupied with tenants, and one thing I'm sure the auditor will be glad to hear, increased tax revenue for our general fund. So gentlemen, if you would please introduce yourself, where you're from, and the floor is yours.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Councilmember Swank. My name is Colin Kelvis. I'm a partner with Bricker Graydon in Columbus, as you mentioned. This is Chris Jones.
I'm also with Bricker Graydon, and I manage our subsidiary called Ohio PACE, which is a program administrator for the Energy Special Improvement Districts. But I'm going to let Colin lead tonight, and I'll be here by his side if he needs help.
Oh, well, geez, thanks a lot. No, so Councilmember Swank, as you mentioned, we're here to talk about the building at 63 Court Street. Up on the screen, it's referred to as a building owned by something called Lostro Ventures, LLC. That's referring to the long history of this building. This goes back to around 1910-15. There was originally an auto sales user in that building. That's the people that built the building. And as part of what's happening, there's a group, the Indus Hotel Group, and they are looking to adaptively reuse this building, take advantage of historic preservation tax credits, some traditional bank lending, but then also what's referred to as PACE financing. PACE is an acronym, stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy, PACE. And PACE is really a mechanism by which private property owners and private capital can use a public financing mechanism to put improvements that increase the energy efficiency or produce renewable energy into a building. So going back to around actually 2009 and 2010, there were some efforts out of this part of the state to authorize PACE financing in Ohio. California was kind of the first state to have a PACE law, and right around that same time, a number of other states adopted it. But what PACE does is takes a tried and true public financing mechanism, which is special assessments, and it makes it available for improvements to private property. So what the General Assembly determined was that we have existing building stock, like the building that we're talking about, that is in desperate need of rehabilitation, adaptive reuse, those kinds of things. And the costs of doing that are sometimes prohibitive, particularly when it comes to upgrading the HVAC, bringing that into modern times, putting in energy efficient lighting, putting in an efficient elevator, those kinds of things. And so what the General Assembly authorized is a 100% voluntary program by which a property owner can arrange to obtain financing for those kinds of improvements, and then they can request that their local government levy special assessments on the property to provide both the repayment and security source for that financing. So in a traditional, mortgage loan, you get money from a bank, you promise to repay it, and there's a mortgage that's put on the property. In PACE financing, again, you get money from some type of a lender, but then rather than just a promise to repay and a mortgage, a special assessment is levied. And that assessment forms both the repayment and the security for that financing. And the public purpose of that is the energy efficiency and renewable energy gains and goals that the state and local governments hope to achieve. So for this particular project, again, the Indus Hotel Group has put together a qualifying energy project consisting of HVAC and hot water improvements, high efficiency lighting, and elevator modernization, costing somewhere around $1.4 million. And they have arranged to get PACE financing from a group out of Atlanta, Georgia called Peachtree that's very active in this space. And they are looking to do about a 21-year term for a total PACE loan of around $1.3 million. And asking again the city to participate in this program. And so maybe just really briefly to kind of round it out, and then we'll just welcome any of the questions that the committee members have. The reason the city is involved is, of course, because of that special assessment mechanism. Private property owners cannot levy a special assessment on their own property. They need the local government to do that. The city has assessment powers, and under a couple different code sections that were amended by the General Assembly, the city is able to participate in this program. There's a process for doing that. Maybe about half of the 240 pages that you were mentioning are my responsibility, and they're involved in this process. And we can certainly step through those, again, to the extent that folks have any questions. But high level, that's what we're talking about.
Two real quick questions and open it up to the committee. People watching at home, and this live stream, it's also archived, so this will be on there for 10 to 15 years. People watching at home and people here today hear assessment. And the first thing they hear is not assessment, but tax. And is that a tax on the citizens of Athens? So the question is, who would pay the assessments?
Yep, it's a great question. And I kind of snuck it in, but this program is 100% voluntary. So the only property that can be assessed for PACE is a property, the owner of which comes and asks the city for the assessment. So in this case, the only property that would have an assessment levied on it would be this particular building. It's configured as one single tax parcel right now. So that would be the only tax parcel that's impacted by this. And the assessments would be exactly the assessments that they're asking for, that they're the amounts that are necessary to repay the financing that they're getting.
Could those assessments also be levied on any tenants of the building who may not be associated with Indus Hotels?
So they can't be directly levied. Again, they would be associated with the property and the owner of the property who's ultimately responsible for the tax bills. Now, under their lease arrangements, it's possible that a portion of the real property taxes are passed through to a tenant. And certainly, that's a common sort of triple net lease structure. One thing that we find in that situation is that often if it is a triple net lease structure, the tenant is also paying the utility bills, so they also get a benefit from the energy efficiency gains.
So kind of like a student rental where the student may not pay the taxes outright, but it's certainly included in their monthly lease.
It could be, yeah. Yep.
Okay. Questions, comments from the members of the committee? Yes, Jessica, I'm sorry.
So being that it's tied to the property, and looking at the history of the company, it seems unlikely that bankruptcy would be possible. That goes on, it has to be sold, do you have examples, or have you had to go through that where businesses have these, are no longer in business, and now that's tied to that property for the next 20 or 30 years?
We do, and maybe this is a good opportunity to mention a couple of sort of just statistics about PACE in Ohio. So like I mentioned, it's been around for somewhere around 15 years. All time to date, the PACE investment in Ohio is around $832 million. That includes activity in about 145 different cities and townships across 36 different counties. I think we're around somewhere around maybe 300 transactions, and there are probably 4 or 5 that have kind of gone bad. And in each of those situations, what has ultimately happened is the property is sold, the unpaid PACE assessments, just like unpaid real property taxes, are brought current, but then the future assessments remain with the property, and the new property owner steps into the shoes of the owner and assumes that obligation going forward. Now, PACE can also be prepaid, and this loan would be structured the same way, where it could be paid off at the event of sale or something like that. But often what we see is that folks actually just want to assume that and kind of continue on with it. That's a benefit of PACE, though, that it cannot be accelerated. So at the moment of that sale, the whole PACE loan cannot be caused to be due and payable, only any unpaid assessments, just like real property taxes. So if you have a foreclosure on a property right now, you can bring their real property taxes current to today, but you can't make them pay 2026 property taxes. It's the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah. Chris is reminding me that the city is never on the hook for any of the special assessment payments. The city's role is just to levy the assessments and to pass them on to the PACE lender to the extent that the city actually gets them.
So to that point, and then Member Wood has a question, the city will collect, the city will pass on. What sort of the time, effort, and labor will that require of our auditor's office based on these other places you work with around the state of Ohio?
Chris, that might honestly be a good one for you, since you're kind of close to that.
So certainly the county offices collect and then remit, back into the city. And then, these would be, specially coded with the PACE special assessment. So when those are received in the city offices, then those would just be forwarded to the PACE lender who made the original payment. So it's, the feedback to us has been it's a very light touch with regards to, the city's, pass-through involvement.
Yeah, basically a pass-through,
Yeah.
exactly. Okay, great.
Yep.
Member Wood?
Yeah, it might be a misunderstanding, but I'm curious what it means for us in terms of any possible reduction in income or property tax that we might be collecting. The treasurer might be the best person to.
It should just be an additional amount on there, on top of the regular property tax and the other assessment.
And do we know about how much this would be as far as like per mill for property owners?
So it's not millage based, it's just kind of a specific dollar that's tied to the PACE financing. And so the current estimate is that this is probably somewhere around maybe $47,000 per semi-annual payment would be what this assessment is. And again, keep in mind, this is only for this particular property, and what that represents is the repayment of principal and interest on money that they're getting to pay for that around $1.3 million of energy efficiency improvements. So it's not like a tax. It's not for the general benefit of the public, and it's not levied on the general public. It's specific to this property. It's really a financing mechanism.
So the city's role in all is just to conform to ORC to make it happen?
Generally, now the way that the ORC works is that in order to do this, an energy special improvement district has to be formed, which is it's kind of an interesting entity. It's a nonprofit corporation and a special improvement district, similar to kind of like downtown business improvement districts that places have. But this is a little unique in that it only includes properties that, again, volunteer and request PACE financing. The Energy Special Improvement District has a board of directors of 5 directors that are in part appointed by the city and in part elected by property owners. And that board can kind of help to review projects and set PACE policy within the city. Often what places will do is just sort of say, well, whatever's authorized under the code, we're fine with, and bring it to us and we'll review as a city council and either approve or not. Sometimes, though, the district is a little bit more involved in sort of setting policy, deciding that there are certain kinds of projects that they want to incentivize or certain parameters that they want to see out of projects that are coming forward. And so there can be a little bit of a policy-making function to all of this, but in general, the idea is just to facilitate what's authorized in the code.
In such a district, do the properties need to be contiguous?
They do not. So for a downtown business improvement district, they do, but for a PACE special improvement district and energy special improvement district, they specifically do not have to be contiguous. So at the moment in time that the city would create the district, technically it would only consist of this one tax parcel. But any other tax parcel within the city could petition council and join the district at any time. And if that were to happen, the district would then consist of this parcel plus that parcel.
But at the end, the purpose is to improve energy efficiency.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, which is very much in line with what we're trying to accomplish on a daily basis. Yes.
So can you describe a little bit how this has worked in other cities? Because you said that if we set this up and you all do it, that other businesses, landowners, whatever, could do it too. So how has that worked in other cities?
Sure. Well, and Chris, this is again probably a pretty good one for you to address in terms of like how folks find out about this.
Yeah, so as the program administrator, what we would look to do beyond this first project that has petitioned the city is, really kind of do some local outreach to all the property owners. And as it was stated kind of in your packet, this is not for single-family residential homeowners, but it is for the rest of the gamut of commercial, industrial, even nonprofits. So churches can take advantage of this, or YMCA's, even though they don't pay the standard property tax, as Colin has said multiple times here, this is a voluntary request for a special assessment to repay an eligible improvement, energy efficiency, renewable energy like solar panels. And so, so we would definitely, reach out and, let the community know, the business community know that, this would now be available for their, use, and then we would come back in front of, the city, and then also in front of the Energy SID board that has to approve the project. So there is a two-step approval on a go-forward basis after the first approval.
So for example, is it okay if I continue?
Yeah, that's what I was just looking down. I figured I'd
Right.
follow up.
So for example, if you're a landlord and you have a multi-unit dwelling,
Yes.
or even a single home, and it needs a new roof and some additional siding that would make it more efficient, that could possibly be part of this. Is that correct?
It could be, but the classification for the multifamily, I believe in Ohio, we're at 4 units or more. That classifies it as a commercial dwelling. So in that scenario, yes, but if it was like a, just again, single family or a duplex, that would not be a qualifying multifamily residential, but that 4 or more units would be.
Okay.
Also, I guess to that point, would also make this point is that there are minimums to this. Typically, these private PACE lenders that are out there will lend up to 30% of the property's current appraised value, or in the case of this project, the future appraised value as the maximum loan amount, but there are also minimums. And right now, the market sets that, but right now, like $100,000 would be the minimum PACE loan amount. Anything below that generally is served by the unsecured loan market, but just wanted to make sure that was.
So not to get into the weeds too much, but, so is there someone who can walk people through this process to make sure that they're doing it correctly?
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
Yours truly, yeah.
Okay,
So,
we've got
yeah.
your name, Chris.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, yeah. So you can kind of look again, as, we would be requesting to be the named program administrator under our Ohio PACE name, and our website is ohpace.org. So you can go on and look there, and that's what you would point if you were to, put our information on the website. That's where you would point the public to, go look at the information, and then ultimately contact myself or one of our staff who would be able to answer those questions and talk the property owner through how this exactly works. We have some, like an initial, what we refer to as an initial eligibility form. that is just basic information to make sure that they do have equity in the property to absorb a PACE loan and not to over leverage a property and all those kind of things. Colin, I think one of the things that we haven't mentioned maybe is that, you know, in every one of these PACE transactions, we do have to have the mortgage lender's consent to the deal, because as Colin said, the special assessment, you know, does take a priority above that mortgage in the worst case scenario. But we do have to have the mortgage lender's consent. So that's always a big piece of the conversation with the property owner, because typically they're not, you know, when they're going out to get a loan, it might either be with that, you know, particular bank, or they might be going to bank number 2 for a, you know, building improvement type of loan.
And I do have one more question, if that's okay. So, one more question, sorry, but I guess what I was leading to earlier was, are there model cities that you can point to that shows, oh, we, you know, improved efficiency by X% over this amount of time, or, you know, certain projects that did that? How has it changed the face of a city by using this program?
Yeah, I mean, as I sort of indicated, so Ohio has done around $832 million of PACE investment. That is the second largest commercial PACE market in the country, second only to California. Ohio is not the second largest economy in the country, so I think we're punching well above our weight when it comes to this. And a few of the cities I think that we would point to as being pretty good success stories. One would be Columbus. And Central Ohio generally. I mean, a lot of folks that are investing there have taken advantage of this in really very similar project types. We've got a number of historic kind of adaptive reuse projects there that have really driven some pretty significant and interesting energy savings into some of those buildings. Another city that's done a really good job with PACE would be Dayton. They also have some really interesting projects, one of them being their historic Dayton Arcade. They were able to take advantage of PACE there to do some really neat improvements, including a geothermal system that provides heating and cooling for that whole building. And I've actually gotten to take a tour of it, and it's really, really cool. But they needed PACE because it was very expensive to put that in, and that was one thing that it was able to achieve. Other examples of?
Yeah, I would just say, you know, maybe kind of, you know, cities similar as yours, but also I think, you know, the appetite for solar here is like, but again, if we haven't said this, but this is more kind of on the external to the business owner and kind of the benefits. So with PACE, you know, there is no down payment or no personal or business guarantee required like there is in a traditional loan. So, you know, so a property owner could put rooftop solar on their building, again, with no money down, no money out of pocket, and then put this on a 30-year term, because PACE affords a term up to the useful life with a maximum of 30 years. And so in today's environment with, you know, the 30% at minimum investment tax credit and depreciations and all those current market benefits, really solar ends up becoming cash flow positive pretty much from day one when you're able to set it on a 30-year term. Another detail to this I would also say is, just so everybody's aware, is that the property owner, because this does get repaid through the semi-annual property tax bill, depending upon the time of year that the PACE loan closing occurs, the first repayment can be, you know, months or even negotiated like this development property, 18 or 24 months down the road. Because, you know, they need some time to get the building built and get some cash flow going. And, you know, that's negotiated between the property owner and the PACE lenders themselves. So, so I would tell you, I'm, you know, not, you know, love energy efficiency as well, because there's a lot of that to go around. But I do think that this community could really beef up the amount of solar panels that can be installed with PACE being a financing option.
One last question, and then over to other members of council. You mentioned churches. Can schools qualify for this? Public schools?
Yep, yeah, public school can. Now, the one wrinkle, maybe relevant to the city, is property owned by the state. That would take like specific action by the General Assembly to be able to use a PACE assessment. But for just a regular public school district, K-12 district, JVS, something like that, yeah, they can all use it. The city can use it, the county, any of those types of political subdivisions. It's really just when you get to the state or the federal government that you run into some issues.
Yeah.
This has all been really interesting. Thank you both for this information. I'm just wondering, in your definition of a multi-unit rental property of being 4 units or more, have you ever considered people like in a college town here who might own dozens and dozens of just single-family homes that they rent to students?
Well, and it's a great question, and that definition is not ours. That's the state's definition for how property is taxed. And it's also sort of the federal government's definition for what type of lending bucket you're in. And so a couple of factors that really go into whether you can qualify for commercial PACE lending are, is the property taxed as commercial or is it taxed as residential? And is it eligible for basically federal multifamily or commercial type lending, or would it fall into kind of the single family, single property owner protections really that would be involved in a residential context? So that's a line that's kind of drawn for us, and it's really just sort of a market reality in terms of what's available. Not to muddy the waters too much, but Ohio's law actually does authorize residential PACE. The thing that we have seen is that for a number of years, the federal government did not like residential PACE, and things like FHA, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, all strongly disfavored residential PACE, and basically said that they would not buy or insure any loans on property that had residential PACE. There were some workarounds for that. Some residential PACE activity happened in a few states, but never really caught on in Ohio. The General Assembly last year did pass a bill that subordinates a PACE loan on residential property to the mortgage. So unlike all other real property tax items that are prior to a mortgage, a PACE assessment on residential property is actually junior to a mortgage. And since then, we really have not seen any real interest in anybody coming and making residential PACE loans. There is one group that does that in a few states, and I think they're somewhat interested. But one of the challenges with residential PACE is that the loan sizes tend to be very small. I mean, it tends to be like replacing an HVAC system in a single family home for, maybe $8,000. And that's great, but to do that at any kind of lending scale, you need a lot of properties. And so that's just been one of the challenges. It's a lot. It's to say it is available, and if the city really wanted to push the envelope on it, I'd be interested in trying to help you all do that. But to date, it's just really not available.
Thank you. I am thinking about how cost savings and helping the environment are very appealing. Can you share why any business or city might not want to kind of qualify for this if they're eligible?
Yeah, and this is one of the funny things about PACE. It's really more just about finding out about it and then doing it, because in a lot of ways it's a win-win-win for everybody involved. I mean, the property owner tends to get long-term fixed-rate financing. The PACE lender gets a good security position. They're able to make these good, again, long-term fixed-rate, typically lower interest rate loans than something like mezzanine debt or partnership equity. The senior lenders don't tend to mind because it increases the values of their collateral, and the PACE loan can't be accelerated, so it's not like they're dealing with the whole PACE loan in front of them. It's just any unpaid installments. It's good for job creation, and then certainly from a city point of view, it's good for economic development, and it's good for your environmental objectives. So there's not really a whole lot of downsides to PACE. I think some of the things are, there's 120 pages to it. It's a lot to understand. There is some administrative time that goes into it, a little bit of cost with that. If you have a property that goes bad and you have to deal with the PACE special assessments on there, it's a little bit more of a unique situation to work through. But I mean, those are really kind of the primary downsides, and there's not a whole lot else, is there, Chris?
Your question I can paraphrase because we get asked it a lot that, where you're hearing it for the first time is, what's the catch? Right? And everybody's like, what's the catch? Yeah, there really is no catch, as Colin just explained, because again, it is voluntary by the, the property owner, and then of course the mechanisms and the processes you all just heard, so, yeah.
Any other members of council? Yes.
So this is about 3 years of payments, twice a year, roughly starting once this is all approved, I'm assuming, or?
It's it's scheduled to be much longer, so it's a 21-year loan.
It's a 21, I saw the 58 semi-annual, I guess.
Yeah, and I think it's actually 42, I think is.
42?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was 58, but when the energy audit came back, the useful life of the improvements is only 21 years, and so you don't want to go beyond that. So anyway, it's about, 21 years. I think the payments are scheduled to start in 26. One, because we are up against the assessment certification deadline for 2025. That's the second Monday in September. And it would be a little tight, but also, as Chris mentioned, they're not done with the building yet, and you typically don't want the payments to start until the building's done and you got some revenue generation going on there, so.
Just quickly, logistically, do you need county government approval for this?
So no formal approval by like the county commissioners. The county auditor, of course, has a role in implementing it on the tax bills, and the county treasurer would have a role in enforcing any unpaid special assessments. But those are, independent elected officers that'll kind of handle that. We actually, in cooperation with the law department and stuff, have been reaching out to those folks to make sure they understand what this is and what it would look like if the city adopts it. So that's the county involvement.
Related to that, I will ask the clerk the question, what official action would this body need to take? A resolution, an ordinance, a combination of the two?
A resolution and two ordinances.
A resolution and two ordinances, and the
They would go through at the same time.
and the resolution, a one reading resolution, or no, multiple? So this could come before council business-wise, next, Monday, with a second reading, the 2nd of, September. Third reading would be the 7th, 9th, 16th, 15th,
Monday in September.
third Monday, but I heard second Monday.
And that's fine. Again, they're not wanting the special assessments to start being collected in 2025. That's what the deadline is for that.
Okay.
So that's fine, yeah.
So our normal process is a committee meeting, which we're having this evening, and then 3 readings. And our business meetings are the first and third Monday of the month. So we'll have one next Monday. And then the next one would be first Monday or first Tuesday in September because of Labor Day. And the third reading would be the third Monday in September. So assuming that this would go through without too many hiccups, would that date work for you?
Yes, and the clerk and the law department have been very helpful in communicating, the city's process out, and I think folks are expecting, at the earliest, that's when something would be available and done. So yeah, that works. They were able to close on their senior lending, so that's been helpful just to keeping the project moving. And they would like to get this done, as soon as possible, but that schedule has been communicated and understood, and it works.
Right, okay, very good. Comments, questions from the administration?
Absolutely. Thank you. I have a very specific question on page 121. No, I don't.
You're gonna have to share it, because yeah.
I was going to say, he can answer it off the top of his head. With my work on the Northeast Ohio Public Energy Council and on SOPEC, Sustainable Ohio Public Energy Council, I've been familiar with PACE financing, so I'm excited to see someone, taking advantage of something like this. I also think it's a great opportunity for other properties in the uptown area or elsewhere in the city of Athens as they see this working to it's not easy to get their head wrapped around right away, but your explanation was fantastic. I do have one specific question for you though, and that is there a FTE requirement per million loaned under this program, or is that not the case with something like this?
Yeah, there's not in like the state statutes or anything like
Okay.
that. If the city wanted to consider something like that, maybe as a way to incentivize or drive kind of additional investment or specific types of investment, I think that's something that you could do as a policy, but there's no requirement in the state statute.
Okay, thank you.
Auditor, treasurer, members of the public. Well, gentlemen, we certainly thank you for driving down from Columbus. Okay. You're hiding back there. If you would, please come to the podium and state your name and address.
I'm Mary Ann Reeves, and I live here in Athens on South Blackburn Road. I'm here also representing the Historic Preservation Commission. We met earlier tonight, and we just saw all the information given to us. So I was just going to ask, but I think it's probably okay, you know, the information that you are doing on your group and PACE, I think it's probably suitable for historic preservation as well, except possibly window replacements and things like that. But we should have seen those before you get in on this deal.
That is correct.
Right. So that's what I wanted to ask, and thank you for letting me just speak. Thanks.
Yeah, well, and I was actually going to say, we've seen a lot of projects that use both historic preservation tax credits and PACE. They go well together. And the other thing is, with respect to windows, actually one of my favorite projects is another one in Dayton. There was a Delco manufacturing building there that they converted into loft space, and they got historic preservation tax credits, and almost the entire building facade there is windows. And they were blown out, they were totally inefficient, but what they did is they specifically fabricated windows to match the historic specs, but they're like ultra efficient. So much so that when you're in there, you can't hear outside. I mean, it's great. The performance is amazing. They cost $3 million, and they needed PACE to pull that off. But that's a great example of how you can use PACE in a historic rehabilitation setting. Mm-hmm.
Anyone else from the audience? Again, gentlemen, thank you for coming down from Columbus. We will be in touch should we have any additional questions, but at this point in time, I foresee this being on the agenda for first reading next Monday.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, that was actually 140 pages, not too bad. Item 2 is only 20 pages, and it's right here in the city of Athens. This is a proposed annexation for a property on the east side of Cable Lane. So if you can imagine, you're at, used to be Super America. What's the gas station down the street from you? Speedway. If you're at Speedway and you head north on North May, you get to the stop sign. And as you go through that stop sign, to the right is a nice brick ranch house. And just past that nice brick ranch house is a driveway that goes off to your right on an angle and up and up and up. I went over and drove up the other day, and don't go down over and try it tonight unless you have four-wheel drive. It's straight up. But we have a proposal to annex approximately 30-some acres to the city, which is now, believe it or not, not a part of the city. And the proposal involves several components. One, the location of a single-family home, and a very, very serious consideration of keeping the rest of that what I'll call a nature preserve. I got all the way up to the top, and on the way back down, I was driving very, very slowly. And if any of you have ever been to the Smoky Mountains in the off-season, I honestly felt that I was on a trail in the Smoky Mountains. The old growth, or what appeared to be old growth forest, the quietness, the diversity of vegetation. It literally was like the Chimneys Campground in 1967. It's just a beautiful area. And to hear that the intent is to probably keep that as a preserve was very encouraging. That's an overview of the project. We have a familiar visitor here this evening, Mr. Mott, and he is the attorney representing the applicant, or really not an applicant, the party advocating for this annexation, as Mr. Mark Snyder, many of you know from many, many years here in Athens. But Mr. Mott, I'll turn it over to you, and anything you'd like to add to that, or questions that members of council might have for you about the project timeline and all of that.
Thank you. That is a very good overview. I think the only thing I would add is that this is specifically intended to be the new home of Betsy, one of Mark's daughters, who is moving back to Athens from California. So tying into the PACE financing. We're still working with California and Ohio. Betsy wants to build her home here, needs access to public water and public sewer. That requires annexation. I would also add that the plan is to run utilities via boring as opposed to trenching, so that it's less disruptive to the area, safer for the hillside. But as you noted, it's a very steep hillside and it's a lot of old growth. It would be financially impossible to develop it now. 50 years, we don't know. So the idea behind the conservation easement is we know we have great old growth forest. Let's just possibly put a conservation easement on it now. Mark and Betsy are talking about that. They haven't been able to nail down whether that will actually work or not. But possibly put a conservation easement on it now, and congratulations, everyone's stuck with it for 200 years. Now, one of the tricks to a conservation easement is you need someone to hold the rights to the easement to enforce it, but I am confident we could find someone to do so. Beyond that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
In terms of the utilities and the boring, the expense for that would fall upon what party or parties?
It would fall on Mark and Betsy.
Okay.
It would be private development. They'd have to pay for the boring themselves.
Okay. One thing I forgot to mention, when I went over there, I stopped and talked to the neighbors and at the bottom of the hill. And Tom said, in the wintertime, if you can't get up the hill, they've got an extra bedroom there. But they would be the ones with the greatest impact from that. And they were just very, very pleased to see the project and spoke very highly of the applicant and what the plans were. So that's always good to hear what the neighbors think about something like that and the possible impact on the neighborhood. Members of the committee? Yes.
I'm cool with it, truly. I mean, I think it's a good idea. I don't see any downside here.
Other members of council? Yes.
Thank you. I was wondering, can you clarify the sewer access? Is there sewer access already there?
There is not.
Okay.
There was a farmhouse there from long before me. It burned down a few years ago, but I believe that I hope that it had existing septic. It's old enough, maybe just dumped it over the hill. Anyway, there is no existing sewer there now, so it would have to be new utilities run for virtually everything.
Thank you.
Members of the administration?
I hadn't heard the nature preserve part yet. Athens needs housing, but you can do what you want with your own property. But as just a matter of policy perspective, when we're looking at close-in development, that's something that I think that this body should consider is it should always be a goal that we try to increase our housing in the city. One thing that we did mention, and this is for the case of the city council, I spoke with Mr. Mott, or our co-director spoke with Mr. Mott about when this property subdivides, or if we're going to do a subdivision associated with it, getting an easement across the property in order to provide sanitary service to property behind this property that currently does not have sanitary sewer service. And that's something that's absolutely essential. And if the property's not going to subdivide, which it sounds like it might not if there's going to be a conservation easement placed on it, say as a nature preserve, we need to make an easement part of this annexation agreement so that the property behind it can access the sewer, because we're trying very, very hard to not allow septic systems inside the city limits any longer. And the property behind it, if it subdivides, is going to have access to the sewer. And the only way to get to the sewer in Cable Lane is to cross this property in question. So
I actually have a couple of responses, then a couple of questions
go ahead.
to your questions.
Yeah, by all means.
There's no plan to subdivide.
Okay.
Obviously, it's large enough that it could be subdivided, but there's no plan. As to housing, yes, we need housing. I don't think this is the place for it. I'm not an engineer, you are. But I have significant concern that any houses built on most of that hillside would be at high risk of just falling off of it. If I'm wrong, you can tell me again, it's not my field.
You can build anything anywhere with enough money.
Exactly, you can. As to the easement for the property behind it, is that the next parcel to the north?
Yes.
Okay.
And west. I'm sorry, east.
Okay. So what has been discussed, and my client is open to it, is possibly an easement to those. And open to that in concept, it's way too early to be able to commit to anything. We don't know where it would be, how it would be installed. One of the concerns with the conservation easement would be, what do they want to put in with trenching? Because maybe we don't want that through a conservation easement.
Sure.
Beyond that, my impression, which might be incorrect, is that the property behind it, at least the property immediately to the north, could be served with sewer from another access point as long as it had a grinder pump, because it'd have to go back uphill. And then to me that just seems like it's a cost consideration for the private owner and not necessarily an annexation consideration for the city.
I understand what you're saying with that. Gravity is always preferable to grinder pumps.
Sure.
I mean, I just took some phone calls the other day while I was driving to my other job on a weekend from property owners in another portion of the city whose grinder pumps had failed, and they were not able to get into the sanitary sewer because their electricity had and you know, so I spent 3 hours on the phone trying to figure out what the problem was, when in actuality it was their grinder pump had failed. So we tried to dissuade grinder pumps as the way to get into the sewer if the sewer is low enough. We tried to encourage property owners to access the sewer by gravity. The property in question behind this 39 acres is at the top of a very large hill, and there's sewer lower than that. So insofar as we have the ability to place a access easement in a place that someone can serve it by gravity, that's something that we would prefer to do simply from the perspective of operating a sewer system. If that's absolutely impossible, yes, people could go by gravity sewer and cross another parcel, or I'm sorry, go by grinder pump and force main and access a higher portion of cable lane. But I think if this property isn't going to subdivide, we may need to, my recommendation is going to be to make that easement a requirement as part of annexation.
I very much appreciate the context. As I said, my client does not have enough information to fully consider where the easement would be, how it would be installed, to say definitively yes, that would or would not be okay. I will share that I have concerns about the propriety of requiring an easement that appears to be for the benefit of a private owner. I have not had an opportunity to research that to determine if it is or is not appropriate. I will probably be talking with Lisa about that. Sure. But that is something that I would need to work through before my client would be able to commit to it.
Sure. No, I understand, and while, I mean, I understand your point about it being to the benefit of a private owner, and I'm not going to argue about that here, but we're talking about policy of the city of Athens on annexation, and how we provide services to other portions of the potential future annexation.
I just want to make sure that we are clearly on the correct side of the line if my client is going to agree to that. I just don't want to create any trouble down the road.
And this body doesn't have to annex the property either.
Mr. Modlis, related question to that comment or something else?
Yes.
Okay. Please.
So I've also toured the property. It's quite an amazing spot. My question was to maybe for Director Stone to fire protection. Do we have requirements for like driveway construction to be able to get to it? Since this house, I mean, unfortunately, it did have a fire once, and I don't know if you were here then. Did we? I mean, it was.
I mean, we responded in that particular fire. I mean, there's a very small water line. It's very far away from the road. Right. Insofar as we'll provide fire protection, we'll provide fire. It's a single-family home, so we're not talking about the construction of a multifamily apartment complex where you really need to have hydrants and that sort of thing. So in situations like that, trucked water from cable lane ultimately would be the mechanism by which you would do firefighting. My gut feel is for construction of a house in a location like this, you'd at least be able to pass a truck, a pumper truck, to be able to get up there. They just might have to have a tank. As opposed to being able to hook to a hydrant, because I don't think they want to build a hydrant up there for just a single-family home, and we're not going to require that. We typically don't.
Thank you.
In terms, Mr. Mott, in terms of the easement discussion and all that, normally when we, more often than not, when we have a committee meeting, we bring this forward for first reading the next possible business meeting. It sounds like in this case there's some details that probably need to be worked out with your client. And with the city on this, correct me if I'm wrong, and if that is indeed the case, would it be appropriate in your mind for you to get back with the Planning and Development Committee as to appropriate time to bring this forward as formal legislation?
Having heard Director Stone's concerns, I think that may be. I'm not sure we would be in a position to move forward at your next regular business meeting, but likely the one after.
Okay. I want to work with your schedule because I think it would be better to have all the ducks in a row and parties in agreement as to what needs to be done rather than getting halfway through the process and throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I don't think that would serve the city or your client.
I agree.
Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
one more question. So you said that the owner does not want to subdivide.
Correct.
But what if the person wants to subdivide later? How would that affect all this? I mean, I'm just curious, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, if there's not an easement, you know what I mean? I don't know.
So a later subdivision of this property, I think, would be relatively easy. It would be impossible to subdivide without providing an easement for utilities. Director Stone, unless there's something in the code I'm unaware of, because you have to have utilities. So it would not be possible to subdivide without providing an easement to the new piece unless it had independent direct access to those utilities.
That's what I presumed, so just wanted to get some clarification on that.
Yeah, no, the issue that Director Stone and I need to work through is how best to provide utilities to the parcel to the north farther up the hill, which is not part of this parcel and is not part of the proposed annexation.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, a couple notes or questions here. One, you said that they intend to pay for the wiring and the utilities, but it says in section 2.1 that the city shall furnish all the customary items, including, I'm assuming, the sewer improvements.
So my understanding of the city system.
Excuse me, I'm not done.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Secondarily, the term of the agreement, it says is perpetual, which, and then it can only be amended by both parties in mediation. And I'm wondering about that language as far as something. Thirdly, I don't see anything actually saying or indicating that this shall be required to be a conservation easement of any sort. I don't see anything in here that indicates that. So those three flags stand out to me.
Sure. Which one would you like me to address first?
Take your pick.
All right, I'll go with the second one. This is an agreement between the City of Athens and Athens Township, which is why it's perpetual, because an annexation has to be handled in a way that one portion of real estate becomes permanently a part of the city and not a part of the township, which is why it's perpetual in nature. And similarly, the conservation easement is not in here because a conservation easement is something that is created by a private party, or it could be a public party, by the landowner, and is not something that is appropriate for an agreement between the city and the township. And as to utilities, furnish in this context just means make available. My understanding of the city's systems is that the city owns its mains up to the tap, and then anything beyond the tap, or maybe even the tap itself, I'm not sure, is privately owned and privately maintained. So everything that my client will be putting in would be on the privately owned side of the mains and the taps, and so they would have to install all of that and pay for all that themselves.
Member Gladfelder.
I would just like to say that, while I absolutely agree that we need housing in Athens, and we should prioritize that when we can, it sounds like this is an amazing piece of property, and I'm really glad that the possibility of turning it into some sort of wildlife preserve is being considered.
Other members of council? Active administration?
Chair,
Oh, sorry.
I do just want to ask Director Stone in response to the comment that you can build anything anywhere as long as you have enough money. I think back to the Summit apartments that were not always here during my time and how I imagined it would be very difficult to put something up there. And now it's there. Would you say that this would be more difficult? Is it steeper, less accessible?
I think it's kind of an apples to oranges comparison. I mean, in that particular application where we were talking about a large multifamily, 900 beds, I think specifically here, Mr. Mott and me as well are both talking about single-family homes. And I would never recommend that you put the Summit of Coates Run type apartment complex on this piece of property, and I don't think it's even zoned for something like that, or would be zoned, because I think when you annex, you'll have to assign zoning, and I presume you're gonna assign R1 to that particular area. So no, I don't think we'd build something like that.
Okay.
But with deep foundations, or you could do single family homes in slip prone areas. You just have to have a design professional look at the way that you're going to build in a particular hillside, and you do a deep foundation on those things. And you can do that with piers that are drilled or otherwise constructed. driven. And you can build in places that otherwise a spread footing is not the most appropriate way to build. And so, and that's not that cost prohibitive ultimately when you're doing just a single building and a single family home. But you'd have to have a design professional, you'd have to have soil tests, you'd have to, look at depth of bedrock, and if you want to get, way into the weeds about how we, would build in footprint soils, I can sit down with you and we can talk about some of those settings.
Thanks, that's helpful clarification. And could you just add potential capacity for single-family homes in that space?
Oh, I can't speak to it because, there's a lot of topographical challenges associated with just access and getting into it. This is not flat ground. If you were to ask me how many single-family homes could you put in 39 acres on a cornfield, you can put quite a few in there and have roads and alleys and everything else to access it. On this particular parcel, not remotely close to as many as you could put in a flat space. So, but I've not done any kind of analysis for that.
Thanks.
Other members of council, members of the audience? Okay, Mr. Mott, opportunity to speak with your client, work out some of these details with Mr. Stone, and we'll wait for your nod as to when you think it's ready for us to move this through the ordinance process.
Very greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item number 3. University Estates TIF. This is another 100-pager. This is, the mayor told us very succinctly a meeting or two ago, this has been going on since the late 2010s. And hopefully we're a little closer to it today. The document that you have in front of you, committee members, you'll see that starting on page 151, there are quite a few red-lined items. Some of them are very simple. For example, the first one on page 151, Tri-County Joint Vocational School District. It's actually Tri-County Career Center. Something like that, simply just names. But there are some that are a little bit more complex. So I've had multiple discussions with Director Stone about this, and I would like him, if he would, to kind of take us through the changes and point out where we were and why we are now where we are today as we negotiate with the builders and everything else to get this, as we just said, needed housing in Athens. Director Stone.
Sure. Thank you, Member Swank. So there were several changes, if you remember, going back to this ordinance that's already going through, and it's on, I believe, third reading coming on Monday. Back when we started it in June, we talked about providing the revised both TIF agreement and the deeds, or the covenants that will go on to the deeds to the attorney representing the developer, so that if there were any concerns about the language that's in that and the updates, particularly with the addition of the minimum service payment, that they could come back and they could let us know, what concerns they have. They brought those back to us, and this list of changes is a kind of a compilation of their concerns as well as some discussion we've had here over the last month and a half. So really, there are 4 major changes, other than the minor things like you noted about the name of Tri-County. The first one is we're removing any mention of the option to purchase that we had placed in there previously. So there was a fail-safe put in that if the developer failed to do this work in a period of time, that the city would have the option to purchase. And what we determined was that option to purchase was unnecessary with the inclusion of the minimum service payment concept. In that, ultimately it ended up being kind of a belt and suspenders, but that option to purchase created a barrier for the developer, and that option to purchase would be in the covenant. And a lender who was lending against that property, when there was an option to purchase in it, whether it's a construction loan or some sort of permanent financing, could see that, and that could kind of put a cloud on the property, and they may struggle with financing. And we said, well, really, all that was to protect the city. If the developer said, hey, we're not going to do anything, then the city could buy it at the appraised value. But that minimum service payment does provides that protection for the city, which basically says if the developer fails to build anything after 10 years, whoever owns the property starts paying property taxes as if the TIF were levied, as though there were things built there. So the city is going to get its money back to build the infrastructure with that minimum service payment. And so I thought that was enough protections for the city, and that we could remove that option to purchase. The second thing is we talked about as another protection putting a requirement for they called it key man life insurance policies on the two partners. And what the developer asked us is, could we remove Pat Lawson from the requirement to put the key man life insurance policy with the city, the city being the payee? And the reason for that is, frankly, to be brutally honest, Pat Lawson is 20 years older than Brett Howard. Pat Lawson costs a lot of money, and Brett Howard, to buy a life insurance policy, somebody in their mid-70s, it costs a lot of money to buy a life insurance policy for them. And Brett Howard intends to do this construction whether Pat remains his partner or not. So ultimately, the key man in all of this, or the key person in all of this, is Brett Howard of the two partners, and he's the one that continues to build and who intends to go. He just happens to co-own it with him. So we removed the requirement to have Pat on the insurance. That's the second change. Third change is just simply a date change to apply the 3% increase that would be applied to go to 2025 for the minimum or for the base unit purchase price, because there's not going to be a house in any of these parcels until 2025. And so the legislation made reference to 2024. 2024 will be passed before any house is available for purchase, and so it just updated it and added that 3% to the minimum purchase price. And then the last was to remove the requirement that the developer gain letters of support from the Affordable Housing Commission and the Disabilities Commission, and instead include language that the developer make a good faith effort to work with buyers to build in conjunction with the universal design principles. And the reason we did that is we did have the developer go and meet specifically with the Disabilities Commission. After that meeting, the Disabilities Commission was unwilling to write that letter of support for this development in any form. The main reason, after me meeting with the executive committee and kind of getting their feedback, was that none of these units would be single story, and they're unwilling to support a development that doesn't include single story construction. And so because they're unwilling to write that, I wasn't going to push that commission on the issue. Instead, we just recommend that we modify that requirement to add, just make a good faith effort to work with the specific buyers. And so those are the four main provisions. Of note, we did bid this project, the infrastructure portion of the project. It came in at about $300,000 lower than our estimate. So we feel pretty good about that. So I am ready to award a bid, but I'm not allowed to until there's a TIF agreement in place, and that TIF agreement has to be approved by City Council. And so once that's in place, then I can sign a contract for construction of the development. I'm sorry, construction of the infrastructure portion of the development. Hopefully I answered that, everything you're asking.
Questions from members of the committee? Yes.
Okay, I have one question and one comment. I think it's important to mention that the Affordable Housing Commission was willing to provide a letter of support.
Right, absolutely.
So I want to mention that. But I think it's really important that in the future we never put anything like this into a provision, because the bylaws for the Affordable Housing Commission and for the Disability Commission specifically states that we are an advisory body. We are not gatekeepers. So there is really it's not appropriate for us to put that kind of restriction on. I could agree, like that or not, but nonetheless, that is what our bylaws read, and that is, so it really didn't fit with what the law says. So I think I want to be really clear about that. Okay.
I would agree. Go ahead.
Okay, and then I have one other question, and that is, in going through this, thank you for the changes and all that, but I'm still, and I think I brought this up in the past, was that it specifically talks about the 2-bedroom units. It never mentions the 3-bedroom units. I find that very puzzling. I mean, it seems that would give them license to charge whatever they want to, and it seems like that seems odd. I don't get that. So, And then also, we've been talking about how will it be third reading next time? With all these changes, how can we justify not going back to first reading?
So, I mean, you'd have to go back to first reading. You'd have to go back to first reading, and then if you wish to suspend and pass it, you could. The longer we wait, the longer I have a contractor waiting, ultimately. But we did say that their bid had to be good for 60 days, so, conceivably, I could wait, and it's just as more time, less time of good weather that a contractor will have to build the infrastructure portion of the project.
And I get that, but I think we should follow procedure, and if it means that we need to, suspend the rules and do that, but I don't want to say that it's third reading.
Sure, oh, no, absolutely. No,
So,
I agree.
that's where I want to go to. But I really want an answer to the 3-bedroom thing.
I can ask them to say what their base price they expect to be for a 3-bedroom. Ultimately, I think market conditions are what they intend to sell it at. But if we want to see what it would be and then bring it back to the body and then say what an appropriate base level 3-bedroom cost would be, we could probably put that in the legislation.
Member Wood brought up used the term earlier, if I may, red flag. This 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom thing doesn't raise a red flag for me, it raises a red banner. Maybe a red Goodyear blimp. Up until this point, it was $267,800 for a unit, period. And here we are coming around the home stretch, and 3-bedroom price just disappears. Combine that with the fact that come August 17th, the real estate market changes in the United States of America in terms of how you buy and sell homes and the commissions you pay. Last week, before we saw this, 3-bedroom unit was $260,000, and suddenly it's not. And that really raises a red flag for me. And it's almost like giving somebody carte blanche. And I think we've all operated in good faith to this point in time. This is a little sketchy, to cut to the chase. So the sooner you can get that back, the better, because you're absolutely right. Winter is not far away, and construction windows begin to close. And the quicker we can get this done, the better. But I think we need to do this and maintain the faith and respect of the citizens of this town, because the city now is going out on the limb for the infrastructure. We've got a lot of skin in the game, where before we really didn't.
Sure, and I appreciate that, Member Swank. Thank you very much. I've been working on trying to deliver housing to the city for a little while. I have a house, so I'm gonna be fine. This is something that I've heard from the community that they want more housing in Athens, and so this is my best shot at it. I'm going to ask the developer to watch tonight and to watch your comments about this specifically, and then if they would like to go and put a number to those 3-bedroom units, they can put a number to those 3-bedroom units. If you're not happy with that number and you don't want to pass this, we have a lot of work to do, and I don't need to turn the Engineering Public Works Department loose on trying to build yet another project. So ultimately, that's where I am on all of this.
Understood. Member Wood.
Yeah, just adding to that, those concerns, I think I was heartened to see the more explicit numbers in general, but I think the biggest loophole that I see is it says any 2-bedroom unit that includes 1 and 1/2 bathrooms. But there's no commitment to ever make any units like that. There's no commitment to have minimum number of units provided at that number. So we're all excited about new housing in Athens, but if just kind of that's a loophole you can drive a truck through, sort of thing.
Yeah, you do too. You got it. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, look, everything's got 2 bathrooms and everything's 350,000. So I would just like to see some sort of minimum lock-in of there will be X number of units that has this base price. So.
One more comment.
Yes.
I think it's important to mention, now that I'm the chair of the Affordable Housing Commission, that one of the things we've heard a lot of criticism about this over the years is that it's not affordable housing. And That's because we have to do a lot of work to explain what affordable housing means. We are not talking about low-income housing. It was never intended to be low-income housing. Affordable housing, by the definition of HUD, really has to do with housing that is appropriate for all levels of our community. We need housing for professors. We need housing for service workers. We need housing for people who come in as executives and professors, et cetera. I mean, all income levels. Now, this is going to fit a particular niche that I think is going to work. So I'm not terribly concerned about that because I know that there are people who want this price point. It's not for everybody, and it's not low-income housing, but it certainly is going to fit. So I'm not really asking for a huge commitment to a low price particularly, but I think it's fair to put something in there for three-bedroom housing. I think that's fair. So that's what I'm asking. Thank you.
Other members of council, yes, sir.
Thank you. I want to thank Director Stone for his work on this, and it does seem like it's a good opportunity for those who can potentially access it. I guess my question kind of goes to what Director Stone's experiences with developers and the Commission on Disabilities might say as to future opportunities to attract developers who can make more accessible places, one floor, for example. Is that something that you've noticed a trend in finding it difficult to attract developers that are willing to do that, or is there something we can do differently moving forward? Mr. Mayor?
I'll take this one. I don't think it's necessarily difficult to attract developers. I think a developer can customize a home into anything the customer wants. And I just need to reiterate to council that these are equity-bearing homes. These are homes that are on the market, or would be on the market for the customer to purchase. And if that customer so chose to include anything from reinforced stairwells to where they could put a rascal or whatever those chair lifts are called to get up to the upper floors, or put in an elevator or whatever for a home as designed that we're looking at right now, they can choose to do that. And anybody purchasing it can choose to do that. Rather than a developer, I don't think you'll ever find a developer that's going to come in and make every home to where they're 100% universally designed, ADA accessible, as a home that can be purchased, whatever the market value is. It's very different when you're looking at multi-housing units, to where they do have to follow ADA standards, to where 5% or greater need to be fully ADA accessible, which may even include installing an elevator, which certainly is going to add cost to that developer. And, you know, hopefully they build that in when they're looking at their own return on investment for a rental unit, you know, something that is not a privately owned facility. Condominiums are very different. I'm not going to get into condominiums, but I just want to share with council that, you know, Director Stone and I have been working on this since 2018 with the sole intent of there being greater housing stock on something that we were being as creative as we legally can be to help a developer build more houses in this city. I am currently looking at Ohio University administrators and faculty who are purchasing, if they can find them, homes elsewhere in Athens County, let alone somewhere in Athens. And meanwhile, I just feel like, I'm going to call it what it is, what I'm viewing as roadblocks that kind of keep popping up. For a developer, it sets us back further and further and further. And meanwhile, we're going to start seeing more and more potential citizens to come and live in Athens, choosing to live not only elsewhere, but when it comes to our largest employer, and this isn't about our largest employer, but when I'm looking at them turning down a potential faculty appointment or an administration appointment or whatever appointment, because they look around and it's like, there's no housing stock that fits my needs here in the city of Athens, and therefore that's a critical asset that individual is looking for when they're looking at their metrics for quality of life. So I just have to say that and get that out there. It's not an Athens exclusive problem. I think we all recognize that. It's a national problem. It's a global problem. Yet Director Stone and I have sat there and looked at every lever we can pull to make something like that work for more housing here in the city of Athens. And it just seems that it's difficult every turn we take, and that's unfortunate.
I would say a great deal of that difficulty is not a roadblock put up by anybody in this room today, but by the developer themselves. They keep changing the rules of the game. Secondly, I firmly believe the people you talked about aren't going to want to live out there. If I'm an executive of Ohio University making $200,000, $300,000 a year, I'm not living in a shared walled place. The problem we have in Athens, we have no builders. They have all retired. Bill Turman, Peterson Brothers, Scott Brooks, Tony Farian. There's not, to my knowledge, more than one house under construction in this town today, even though we have ample lots on which to build. Houses in my neighborhood on the far east side, which 2 years ago sold for $315,000, just last month sold for $450,000. A house right across the street, 1,800 square feet, that looks like a house you would see in Clearwater, Florida, just sold for $425,000. The house we built in 1983, bought in 1983 for $41,000, 2 months ago sold for $263,000. Nobody's building them because we have nobody to build them. Any developers are going to have to be from out of state, or excuse me, out of the city. But we don't have a cornfield. We're building one-offs, and those are expensive. So I don't think there's a person on this dais or my three colleagues there that don't want housing in this town. But you can't keep changing the rules of the game. And that's what's happening. And I have a real problem with that, and I have a real problem, stated again, with the lack of a price on a 3-bedroom unit. That wasn't on there. If that was on there today, I don't think we'd be having this conversation. Member Wood, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to add on. I mean, I think we're all going to, again, speaking in favor of more housing. I think that Service Safety Director Stone said something earlier that I think is apropos. Yeah, you can make the proposal, but it's our money, we don't have to do it, and so, and it's the first time that it's come before this body. I mean, this is relatively new to our, to this group of council. I want to also say that I am worried about having more affordable low-income housing. I am worried about having things that are accessible to folks of lower income, especially in a county where the median family income, household income is $50,000. So I am worried about that. And so I don't think that it's a huge deal to say that we use a TIF like this, which I've kind of come around on. I was pretty skeptical, but I've very much come around that they're a great tool, and thank you for finding it. I think it's an excellent way to kind of leverage the assets we have, but part of that should be a little bit of a give and take, that we get something back in return, and that we can, in turn use that to look out for people that do need a affordable home. So yeah, I just think it's not a big ask to say that there'd be something in it that because these things are going to sell, they're going to make all their money back and then some. Or the developer is going to make plenty of money on it. So why not use this as a time to have a little bit, put back for our community.
Well, I just want to say that I appreciate all you've done for this, really want to get this done. This is in my neighborhood. I'm not sure that everybody in my neighborhood actually wants these, but I think it's important. And I wish something like this was available at a lower price when I started anyway, but, because I was looking for a nice townhouse, and my family said, why don't you look for a townhouse? Why look for a house? Because there aren't any. Anyway, so I'm looking forward to having this done, but I appreciate, oh, and I was gonna say, part of the problem that went through this was because of the increase in prices that really threw things off, and that wasn't anybody's fault. And I think we have to remember that. And yes, we do want to have housing for people with disabilities. We do want to have housing for low income. Absolutely, we're going to do that. This just isn't specifically for that. And also, I just want to say that the reason that it was, part of the reason it wasn't, is because of the topography would make it so that if you wanted to do one level, it would be just really prohibitive to build. It's just the way it's configured. So I think that could have been otherwise, but it just didn't work. So.
Yes, ma'am.
I just would like to echo a lot of what Steve said. A lot of things can be true at the same time, that we need low-income housing, that we need accessible single-story housing. You know, I'm glad you brought up the topography, because that's what I've been thinking the entire time, is there's not a feasible way to fit 5 houses in that area, let alone 40. I don't think the rules have changed a lot. I mean, there's probably debate in that, but, and we could ask for the prices and whatnot, but there is a demographic for this here. You know, I mean, we are down, I'm down to empty nest. I don't need a house that I have. I would do a townhouse, or at least consider it. And I think there are other people who would give up our single family homes if there's other places to go. And I think it's been coming a long time, and this is, we're not you know, as we discussed early on, we're not giving them the money. We're investing into it, but we're getting it back, and there's a good multi-phase process for that is a safety net for the city. Yeah. I think it makes a lot of sense, and moving forward on it makes sense.
Other members of council? Back to administration? Other elected officials? Members of the audience? All righty, good deal. So if we can get some of those numbers, and we'll take a look at that, and so we'll bring this up for, what was it, third reading next week, or?
First reading.
Or first reading? First reading, yeah, that's right, first reading, I'm sorry. First reading next week, okay. Last item on the agenda, this is an easy one. Ryan, could we have some slides, please? Let's go one more, please. There we go. Let's assume you're Larry's dog, not Larry's Doghouse, you're at Miller's Chicken. And you come out of Miller's Chicken, you start down Central Avenue. You get to that first stop sign, which is Clark Street. That's where the Methodist Church is. You make a left there, and you go to the next stop sign, and that's Curran. If you make a right, you end up at Code. If you make a left, you would then drive into the old West Elementary playground area. As you're driving, so imagine here you come this way and you're driving that way, you're going to get to a spot like this, and this is, one more slide please. There you go. You're going to start down this alley. This house to the left, believe it or not, is 49 Central Avenue, even though you can't see it from Central Avenue. If you're standing down on Central Avenue looking up, go one more slide please, one more. Yeah, all right, that's good right there. I'm on Central Avenue. See that house back there on the left? That's 49 Central Avenue. I didn't even know it existed. Go back one slide, please. What they're asking for is use of the right-of-way here on the far left. This is an alley. They're the only people who use it. One more slide, please. And you can see where those 2 cars are. That's my car there on the right. There's their 2 cars there. They want to be able to park there. And then one more slide, please. This, when they bought the house, they discovered is also already in the right-of-way. So they want to be able to park their cars there to the left on that gravel alley, and they want to be able to walk out their front door, down the steps, set a chair on that brick patio, in the right-of-way. So they're simply asking for use of the city right-of-way. They've done it the right way. The pastor went down to code, filled out the form, paid the money, and now it's before us. There's no traffic up and down that alley other than them and my car to go see to take these pictures. That's what they're asking for. Comments from members of council? Seems pretty cut and dried. Members of the administration? Oh, yes, Beth, I'm sorry.
That's okay. You make a really compelling argument. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. My only concern is if two cars park in what is that alley, would emergency service vehicles still be able to get back there if needed?
Ryan, can we have the slide back, please? The one that shows the two cars plus mine. They're not actually in the alley. They were parked there before I came, and I was able to come down that alley.
Okay.
Not any problem at all.
And they plan to keep parking where they currently are parking?
Yes. Yeah. There's plenty of room down. In fact, I would be more concerned about getting the emergency vehicle around that telephone pole and between the telephone pole and that tree, which, by the way, they were cutting down today, the tree, not the telephone pole. Any comments from the audience?
Hi, my name is Jimmy Blackwell. I don't really know how to do this, but I'm from 49 Central Avenue. And so if you had any questions, I'm the they. But yeah, we just want to be able to pull up our car next to those stairs so we can unload our kids and not have any worry about thorough traffic and not have to take down our the porch. So, yeah, thanks.
Any questions for Mr. Blackwell? Okay, thank you, sir. Sorry to make you wait an hour and a half till you were on the agenda. I was hoping you'd be first up.
Oh, no, that's all right. Civic, process.
Good deal. All right, well, that concludes the Planning and Development Committee for this evening.
Thank you, Member Swank. We will move on to City and Safety Services, chaired by Member McCary, joined by Member Reisner, Member Swank, and Member Thomas.
Thank you, President Crowell. We just have 2 items on our City and Safety Services agenda for this evening, so I believe this will be more brief. We're also talking about projects that will sound familiar to those who tune in regularly. The first being Project 330, which has been going on for quite some time for sewer improvements, and we are here to discuss updates regarding easements with the state of Ohio. Specifically, an ordinance affirming the Service Safety Director's execution of easements with the state of Ohio necessary for the construction of city sewer system improvements, project number 330. I'll ask Dr. Stone, I'll ask Director Stone if he would provide an update on project 330.
Thank you, Member Kay. I have 2 master's degrees. I have no intention ever of getting a PhD. All these are easements granted by the state of Ohio, both Ohio University and the Ohio Division of Mental Health for ABH, where the sewer will pass that property. These are 25-year easements. They've already executed them. They've already granted them to us. All you are doing at this point is accepting them, and they're necessary in order to build the sewer.
Thank you. I believe this will be a pretty straightforward item, but do we have any members of the committee who have questions at this time or comments? Other members of council? Administration? Other elected officials? Anyone in the audience? All right. We'll move on to our second City and Safety Services Committee agenda item for the evening, Title 25, Flood Damage Prevention. This is following up on a ordinance that I tabled or proposed that we table on June 3rd. And we were talking about the need to update our maps and some other requirements. And we now have those updated maps and an amended ordinance to consider. And I'll ask Director Stone if he has anything to add to that.
Sure, thank you, Member Gary. And ultimately, what happened was so FEMA regulations are perpetuated through the state to localities. And the entity at the state that perpetuates these is the Ohio Department of Natural Resources when it comes to flood damage prevention. They've recognized that there are new maps for us. We have to accept those new maps, and there's a variety of things in our legislation that have to change to line up with those new dates. In the meantime, since the old maps, we're in effect, there's been some other changes in FEMA regulations, and so what happened was that the representative from the Ohio Department of Natural Resources went through our legislation and identified where some of those other federal regulations changed and did those markups for us. And so we're bringing those back to you now to accept. And there's a letter, I think, from David, that Director Riggs, that kind of describes those, and then you obviously have the markup.
Yes, Member Swank.
Director Stone, just out of curiosity, the plans that we've already passed to start taking a close look at the river from White's Mill down to Richland Avenue, down the road, could that possibly have an effect on maybe getting new maps, or is that not going to be of significant enough nature?
Sure, I think those are two different things. I mean, specifically what we looked at and what we're looking at on the Hocking River on the revised channel is things that we can do or things that a project could do to improve the environmental quality of the water and the ecosystem immediately surrounding the water. And that's an authority granted to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to spend money on their past projects for flood control to make them environmentally better. I don't think any changes that would happen there would have a significant effect on the maps. However, they will do HEC-RAS modeling against all of any proposed modifications to see if it would impact the base flood elevation. So, I mean, I suppose it could, but really they're kind of apples and oranges things.
Thank you.
Additional questions and comments from committee members? Other members of council? Administration? Other elected officials? Audience? Seeing none, I will say that we are concluding our City and Safety Services Committee meeting for the evening.
Thank you, Member McCary. We will move on to Finance and Personnel, chaired by Member Reisner, joined by Member Wood, Clodfelter, and McCary.
Thank you, Mr. President. Finance and Personnel Committee has a few items here, but hopefully it won't take too long. We have several appropriations to talk about, then a now certificate of payment approval, and then an ASME local 240.03.1 contract. So first thing is we have $15,400 to the General Fund Municipal Court for balance of payment to the 2024 Public Defenders Agreement. Would the administration care to speak to that? Auditor?
I can. We run into this from time to time because our contracts with the Public Defender's Office are usually for the calendar year, which is our fiscal year, but their funding sources are not on that same calendar. So sometimes that changes what they need from us to pay their bills. So we received a letter on July 3rd telling us that the contract had gone up. It says increased by 53%. It's primarily due to the change in the state reimbursement rate, and the rate may increase when the addendum comes out in 2025. So the thing to keep in mind is that our contract right now, because of this funding, issue between our fiscal calendars, is from July 1st through December 31st, so it's not a full year calendar even. But we have money in the budget, but we need an additional $15,000 to pay our bill for the Public Defender's Office.
Thank you. Any questions from committee? Questions from other council members?
Why did it go up so much?
Member Solvay? Yeah.
So 53%? Do we have some understanding? Did I miss it? Do we have some
Yeah,
understanding?
primarily due to the change in the state reimbursement rate.
Yeah, I heard that.
So how much money they get, you know, the public defender is basically a free
Yeah.
service. And so they get money from the state also.
So are you saying that the state is refusing to spend much money for that? Because that's a trend around the country.
I don't really know. I
Giving
can't
us
say
less.
that.
Yeah, that's my point. I'm just concerned that this is something that is really important to the health and safety of folks in this community and around the country. And there's this effort around the country in certain places where they don't want to pay for public defenders. And people need that. And it really bothers me. And I think that needs to be said. So I'm sorry to say that they push that down to the local level. I think that's bad. But I think we have to do it. We're stuck with it.
Member Swank?
Speaking of local level, if this is the way it's going to be going forward, and it won't be too long, you'll be getting to start talking about next year's budget on an annualized basis, how much more it's going to cost us.
I can't tell you that right now. I can try to figure it out, but it depends on the change. How much it will cost us.
Okay, but it could be significant. Okay.
Well, doesn't the county have to throw some money in the kitty?
Yeah, the email we got with this information is from the commissioner's office.
Any idea of how much they're paying? They're not saying. They're just,
I mean, I
yeah.
never asked,
no.
but we could ask.
I know we've had some disputes with the commissioners over the years about how much each of us should be paying, because we have the municipal court, we have the attorneys, but most of the crime occurs in the county. Yet there's an inequity here between what we pay and what the county pays. The county's always paid less. And I think there's been, I believe, I'm thinking back when I was first on council, when Mayor Weil was arguing with the commissioners about this. And we went back and forth several times, and finally they sort of relented and kicked some more money into it. But, I mean, this has been going on for years, and it'll continue. Yes.
Do we have an obligation per the ORC to pay this?
I don't know how we would, I assume they wouldn't provide the services if we didn't pay. This is the public defender.
Right, no, understood, but to pick up on your point, not only the crime, but also the population. City of Athens, we have, what, 23,000, 24,000 people, and the county has 66,000.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always been a bone. Mayor, you want to jump in on this?
I just want to say, I mean, I know that the auditor has been watching this and managing this for a long time in terms of what it's costing and so on and so forth. And I think maybe these are good questions to pose to the judge.
Perhaps he's listening right now.
I doubt it, but.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I guess we'll be discussing this on Monday. Well, get an ordinance together, right?
Thank you.
Next item, $6,330 to General Fund Police to replace a cruiser mount and tablet. I assume that means computer, right? and provide infrastructure for an EV charger for a new cruiser. Discussion on that?
I'll just stand here. I mean, if you don't have any
Okay.
questions.
I can speak to this one specifically. So, the 6330, with proceeds from the sale of a former undercover vehicle. And, you know, when we get a check for one of those sales, you can't just spend it, you have to appropriate it, right? And so it has to come into the general fund and then get appropriated. And so the commitment of those funds is what we're asking for this, the sale of that vehicle.
Thank you. Auditor, anything to add?
Not really. That's exactly what this is they got money from sale, as Andy said, and they plan to use this money for this equipment for the new vehicle.
Okay. Member Swank, you had a question? Oh, okay. Psychic. Committee? Member Clodfelder.
I just think it's great that it sounds like we're getting another electric vehicle in the city's fleet.
Kind of sounds that way. No?
Kicking and screaming, we're getting there.
All righty. Next, $12,000 to general fund other administrative for city disbursement of reimbursed NOPEC grant funds. Take it away, someone.
I can run with this one.
Okay.
As council is aware, we created a rebate program for individuals wanting to migrate off of a carbon belching two-stroke lawnmower or weed whacker or whatever their yard implement is. It's been, I would say, very successful at this point in time. We've had 24 people take advantage of this program. We've had, I think, half of those have received their rebate on this, which is wonderful, how timely we've been able to honor our end of that rebate to the citizens. Again, this is using the Northeast Ohio Public Energy Council's Energized Community program. So this is money that's coming to the city based upon the number of customers that are within the NOPEC gas aggregation program. People are turning in to us down at the service garage their used two-stroke lawnmowers or whatever, or they're disposing of it themselves. But this is, again, just to appropriate. We are calculating out that we probably have another 26, probably up to 50 total rebates with the money that we have at hand with the $12,000. So it's, again, appropriation from council.
Member Clodfelder.
Just a specific follow-up. When people are turning in their combustion-based lawnmowers or what have you to the city garage, what are we doing with those?
Scrapping them.
Okay.
We're scrapping them.
Member Swank.
Is any thought, and I know we want to get rid of these mowers as best we can, is any thought been given about donating them to one or more of the local school districts to use in their small engine repair classes for teaching and training kids?
We haven't given any thought to that. We could. Or to Tri-County.
I know Athens High has an excellent small engine repair class. I would love to have them.
We could do that. I mean, we again, not explored it. I'm sure that we could do something along those lines. I would like to add to this. I mean, carbon emissions is great. I mean, in my administration, we're laser focused on ways in which we can reduce our carbon footprint throughout the city. And this is a way that a resident can. Something else we don't talk about a whole lot is noise pollution. So if you stop and think about an electric lawnmower versus a two-stroke mower, it's hopefully making things quieter for your neighbors who probably still have a two-stroke lawnmower. So
I don't have a lawnmower. Can I get involved with this anyway?
you can't trade in your goat, Jeff. So that's not permissible. However, you're mowing your yard. You're an amazing guy. I mean, this summer, if it said anything about, scorched earth, my grass hasn't been growing either, but I'm not getting rid of a lawnmower.
Any other questions? Auditor, anything to add?
No?
Treasurer? Audience? Okay, well, we'll move on. $7,000 to garbage fund to cover internal service fee. Whoever wants to talk to that one?
I'll talk to that. It was just, wasn't budgeted correctly. We've already spent that much in those, transfers so far this year, so we need that much more to get through the end of the year.
Okay. Questions? Members? Other council members? Audience? Administration? Okay. And the big one, $74,500 to East State TIF Fund and transfer to Street Fund for repaving the East State Street area bikeway.
Thank you, Member Reiser. So bikeways, bike paths, sidewalks in the TIF area for the East State Street TIF, which is the TIF that's been in place for a long time, are eligible expenses under that fund. So when we do have something that actually comes in that's an eligible expense under that legislation from 2002, we try to access the TIF funds because otherwise it just builds in that fund. And so we're asking for you to appropriate it and then transfer it to the street fund so that we can pave a significant portion of the bikeway out in the East State Street area.
How far would the paving go?
1.71 miles.
Questions from members? Member Clodfelder?
I'm just curious specifically where would this paving be?
I'll pick up at the East State Street, or I'm sorry, at the US 33, which is that end of the TIF district, and then go east until I can't go beyond. There actually isn't enough money to go to the end of the TIF district area because we can't go over that threshold of $75,000 because of bidding requirements, but I can go pretty far. So I think the exact location is probably around Walmart, that particular area.
Thank you.
Member McCary?
Thank you. Director Stone, could you also comment on the current condition of that part of the bikeway?
It was built in 2003 and then extended in 2007, 7 or 8, that time frame. So we're looking at the first portion of it being over 20 years old of asphalt, and then the next portion, 14, so a little bit more than that. So we're due to do an overlay. The county's done a significant overlay. We're already going to do some paving in East State Street Park for that. So I think it's just time that we renew this important resource of the Hakakinadita Bikeway, and we have an opportunity here, and that we had some great numbers come in compared to what we've been seeing on the annual paving bid. So we thought we'd try to take advantage of it.
Thank you.
Other members of council? Okay, audience? No? All right, so we can bring this, all these appropriations together under one ordinance, can't we?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I like efficiency sometimes. Then and now certificate payment approval.
So these then and now certificates usually come up early in the year when we go from one year's budget to another. However, they could happen anytime. When we spend money, we have to have an appropriation in place, and this is for an ice maker for Station 2, and if we purchase over, we just need an appropriation for it. It's over $3,000, which means we have to get permission. The money is there, but we have to get permission to go ahead and pay it because it was ordered before they have permission to pay for it, if that makes sense. It's what a then and now is.
Yeah.
Is,
I haven't seen one of these come up in a while.
No. We're pretty good. I believe there was some confusion about which station it was for. Whether it was for the new station or this one, and so that's part of the reason there wasn't a purchase order in place before it was ordered.
I see. Questions about this? Other members of council? Treasurer, you got anything to say? Okay. How's interest rates doing, by the way? Good. I always like to hear that. Audience, anything? Okay. And last, we have the AFSCME, ASME Local 2403, parentheses 1 contract. I believe we discussed this last week. Would the administration or the auditor care to talk about this?
Thank you, Member Reisner, and the personnel, or Human Resources Director was here and kind of gave a brief synopsis, or more than a brief synopsis, I understand, in executive session last week, but you'll have the full version with all changes redlined to you in advance of first reading.
Any questions from committee? Member, sorry, your name's escaping me at the moment.
Director Stone, has it come before the committee, the union vote yet?
So we expect the union vote to occur prior to third reading. And so if for whatever reason the union chooses to delay that vote, I will ask you to table this until such time that they do vote, because I don't want to have a situation where the council approves the tentative agreement and then the union votes it down. That's just in bad form. That happened to me once. I'm not going to ever allow it to happen again. So, like I said, if going through the readings that happens, I'll ask you to table it.
I remembered your advice on that matter, and that's why I asked. Thank you.
Member McCary, did you have a question? Okay. Other members of council? Auditor, anything? Treasurer? Audience, anything? Well, I believe that concludes the committee for this evening.
Thank you, Member Eisner. We will move on to the Transportation Committee, chaired by Member Spielness, joined by Clodfelter, McCary, and Reisner.
Okay, I guess we're ready. Wow. It's a little loud, isn't it? Okay. The first one is the Ohio Public Works Commission Issue 1 Funds Application. And I requested some information about that last week, and basically it seems fairly straightforward. But I received the response that this is a state bond-funded funding stream we apply for every year. We are successful about 2/3 of the years. It maxes out at $400,000 in grants. There is a formula that applies points to the project you submit to determine if a project is competitive. There is some art to submitting the project to maximize the points. Typically, only arterial roadway or bridge projects can compete. There is also a county subcommittee prioritization process that the mayor sits on. Last year, he deferred to Nelsonville and Athens County for higher point assessments, so it is our year to be prioritized. It's our turn. Okay, our plan is to submit the 682-56 roundabout project that we've been hearing about, as there is not enough federal funding yet for that project as I would like. I should be able to give you a full breakdown today, I hope. Anyway, you want to add to that, Director Stone or the mayor?
Well, since I serve on OPWC Executive Committee and the subcommittee, I can certainly speak to this. Just a little more detail, the way this works with the subcommittee is grant or potential projects throughout Athens County. So it can be county projects, it could be township projects, it could be other city and village projects. They all get scored based upon their potential success of being funded. There's also a ranking to where the first, second, and third could be eligible for, they are eligible for additional funding points, which drives you up further. Without getting into all the metric details of that, I do believe that with this project, that we will be highly competitive under OPWC to continue with the capital stack that's necessary for the 682-56 roundabout.
Can you give us an idea of how much money we have and how much money you're hoping to get?
In layman's terms, currently not enough, and we need an awful lot. We have about 1.4 million that we've received already, or that we have been awarded from ODOT. This project is probably gonna cost, 2 to 3, maybe 4 times that amount. We're looking at about, what, 400K? 3.2 million is what we're looking at, but 400,000,
That's the OPWC.
yeah, 400,000 through OPWC.
So that seems like a gap there. Did I hear that?
There is a gap, and then
So-
ultimately we'll fill that gap with local funds. I mean, there's, the street fund is not in terrible shape. The street rehab fund also has money in it, and the purposes of those funds are to pay for the gap in between federal funding and state funding and the actual cost of things. And so I think we can get across the finish line on this one without taking a loan, and that was a big goal of mine with this particular project. And one of the reasons that I want to put this year's OPWC application towards it is to avoid taking a loan. Because as I mentioned to this group before, we borrowed money on Stimson, we borrowed money on West Union Street, and I think we need to stop borrowing on transportation projects for a while. So that's the target here.
So the goal, I understand, is to start next year
Correct.
on this? Okay.
Correct. So, I mean, ultimately, we want to have plans in place and be able to bid this project in state fiscal year '24. So that is to say, bid it, sell it before July 1st of '25. It doesn't have to get constructed before that, but ODOT wants us to sell early. And they may cough up some additional funding if we can do that, because there's other places around the state that have it. And that's what they've told us, is if we can get it sold prior to July 1st of 2025 and get under contract with somebody, they may be able to cough up some extra federal money ultimately that comes off of somebody else's project that didn't get it spent.
A lot of work. Yes, thank you very much. Any comments from committee members? Okay, go for it.
Can you refresh our memory of what the extent of the project will be?
Sure. Can we speak to that? Yeah. The project is to build a roundabout at 682 and 56. The last time we did a significant intersection upgrade at that particular location was 2006, where we added the turn lanes in all 4 directions. And we know when we travel through that area, particularly during PM peak, we still have some congestion issues. Also, ultimately, the reason we got awarded funding for a roundabout is because of crashes. Roundabouts are safer when it comes to high speed, injury and fatality crashes. And while we haven't had a fatality at that intersection, I don't think in the last several years, we have had quite a few injury crashes there. So this is something that, attempts to deal with both congestion as well as crashes.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? How about other?
I read that there is a open house forum, whatever you want to call it, at City Rec, Thursday, 3 to 6? Is that when it is, this Thursday?
Correct.
I think so.
15. Is that Thursday?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's a NEPA requirement that we do public input as part of designs and such. We do that for all federally funded projects. But, obviously this is another one that's important that we get feedback from.
And again, let's make that announcement clear, because that was a little bit fuzzy. So it's going to be Thursday from 3 to 6 at the community center. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
Right. Okay, so you're all welcome to come and give us your input and take a look at the plans. Any other comments, questions, audience, elected officials, anybody else? Okay, well, we'll move on then. Almost done. Geez, okay, long day. All right, dump truck amendment. I think this one was, I need to pull it up here. It's gonna cost a little more money than we thought it would, if I remember correctly. So it originally said Service Safety Director is hereby authorized to expend up to $170,000. Now it's gonna be $176,000 from the sewer fund for the purchase of a dump truck. I'm assuming we need a dump truck. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Not really. Price escalations aren't to the truck itself. They're to the components that get added to the truck afterwards. So the body and some of the other components that get added in the aftermarket. And then specifically, this is going to be what we use to move sludge out of the wastewater treatment plant. So it's a dual axle truck, and it'll be used to truck sludge to the landfill. after it's compressed and the water is pushed out of it. And so right now what we do is we have a roll-off dumpster that sits there, and we pay to rent that dumpster and then to have it pulled on a regular basis, and this ultimately will take the place of that.
So in the long run, it'll save us a little bit of money.
I think so.
And hassle.
I think so. That's the goal.
Okay.
That's the goal.
The vast range of the things you have to know. It's amazing. Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Anybody else? It's a long day, so elected officials. Okay, we have someone from the audience. You have to come up and state your name, and
This may not be related to this line item.
you still have to go stand up there. But it needs to be relevant to this item.
It's not.
Oh, well then, sorry. Can't do it then. All right, let's see, that is it for this committee. We have one other item today.
Great, thank you, Member Spionis.
Thank you.
Council, you may return to the dais if you'd like. You may stay there. The last item is Committee of the Whole, and it is Ukraine Independence Day. We will be reviewing a resolution on Monday to recognize our partners in Austro, as well as the country of Ukraine. They will be recognized, they will be celebrating their Independence Day on the 24th of August. I believe the mayor is committed to flying the Ukrainian flag next to the U.S. flag at the Armory, I believe. And we are working on a Zoom event with the City Council of Austro-Ukraine. One of the ideas I think the mayor and the mayor of Austro had put together. And this resolution, which you all will be able to review later this week, is simply recognizing our relationship with the city of Austro and Ukrainian independence and congratulating them on that, much as they did when on July 4th for our independence through an email. So any questions about the resolution to commemorate Ukrainian independence Day? Yes, Member Claudia.
I'm just curious if any thought has been given to when that Zoom meeting will be held.
No, no, we have to work on those details.
Okay.
And the Independence Day, 17th, 24th?
24th of August, I believe, is Ukrainian Independence Day. Any other questions? Mayor, anything to add?
I do, just briefly, and that being that at this point, it looks like the president for the National University Austro Academy will be coming to Athens to meet with myself as well as university administration, senior administration and others. I think it might be a great opportunity to where once this resolution is passed, if the council chooses to, that we frame it and have that ready to present to the rector with the request that it is shared with city council and with the mayor of Austro, which would be, I think, a very nice gesture.
Is there a date for that visit yet?
It'll be in early October.
Okay, thank you.
I will give you more details once they unfold.
Excellent. Any additional questions or comments on the Ukrainian resolution? Members of the public? Elected officials, anything to add? Thank you. We are adjourned at 9:03 p.m. Thanks, everyone.